The air on the Gateway space station always smelled of ozone and metal. Adrian Keller had gotten used to it after 3 years here. He was floating in the lab module, legs drifting idly in zero gravity, focused on the spectrographic analysis of a dust sample from the Kuiper belt. Cold, white LED light shone down on his hands, making his skin look as pale as a corpse. This was his job, sorting the lifeless debris of the solar system, trying to assemble inanimate bricks into the story of our origin. The hatch opened with a soft hiss of compressed air. Captain Mira Havel, commander of the ESA Expeditionary Squadron, entered. The 16G artificial gravity made her stride feel strangely deliberate and heavy. "Adrian," she said, cutting straight to the point, her voice slicing through the quiet. "Emergency briefing. ESA just rerouted us." Rerouted? He paused his work, a finger hovering over the touchscreen. "We're prepping for the Europa mission in 6 months. Everything's been planned for 5 years. Europa can wait." Mira handed him a tablet, her face expressionless. "They found a visitor. It just crossed Neptune's orbit." The screen displayed an object provisionally named 3IAtlas, an interstellar comet. Keller frowned. "We saw Oumuamua. We saw Borisov." "What's special?" "Its trajectory." Mira pointed to the complex hyperbolic chart. "It's not flying by. It's actively decelerating. And it has no tail. Zero cometary activity." Keller fell silent. An interstellar object, emitting no gas, and actively slowing down. His heart hammered. This was no longer a lifeless rock. "They've renamed our ship," Mira said, her voice low. "No more Europa Explorer. Welcome to mission Helios IX." 6 months later, no more familiar ozone smell from Gateway. Only the absolute silence of the Helios IX, broken by the steady hum of the air recycling system. 38 hours until we intercept Atlas. Captain Mira Havel's voice came over the intercom, as dry as the void between the stars. Adrian Keller looked through the 20 cm thick radiation-shielded viewport. In the endless dark, the comet 3IAtlas appeared as a strange blue dot, unblinking, unchanging, with no gaseous tail. Just a silent object floating in the void, like a giant unblinking eye staring back at them. He remembered his feeling on Gateway. A stellar visitor, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But the closer they got, the more he felt that he wasn't the seeker, but the one being summoned. A vague feeling, like an ancient melody echoing from his subconscious. The first radar sweep, the results sent a hush through the cabin. Atlas didn't reflect the signal like a normal ice and rock body. It absorbed the radio waves completely, like a perfect black blanket, and then responded with a pure signal at 1,420 megahertz, as steady as the heartbeat of the universe itself. "That's the hydrogen spectral line," Keller said, his voice hoarse. "The natural frequency when a hydrogen atom changes its energy state. It's the sound of the most basic matter. Could be a natural resonance phenomenon?" asked engineer Li Wei, a man who always trusted the rules, his voice tinged with skepticism. "No." Keller shook his head, eyes fixed on the perfect waveform. "This signal is too perfectly modulated. It's not natural noise. It's the one language every civilization that observes the sky must know." Captain Mira crossed her arms, her sharp gaze fixed on the screen. "You're saying it's broadcasting?" Keller nodded slowly, a strange sense of awe rising within him. "Or responding to our presence." As the ship entered a provisional orbit around Atlas, high-resolution radar detected a 6-sided, symmetrical fissure running for hundreds of meters across the object's surface. The surface around the fissure pulsed gently, emitting a cold, indigo light that shifted constantly like liquid metal. Sensors registered a constant ultrasonic vibration, giving the impression that something was groaning at a subatomic level. "It looks like a door," Mira whispered, her voice wary. Following procedure, Helios IX launched an €80 million probe. The moment it touched the indigo light, the drone instantly vanished from their systems. Not an explosion, not disintegration, it was simply swallowed. The drone's last telemetry feed showed its temperature dropping to near absolute 0 Kelvin within a millisecond. Then, a few seconds later, Atlas emitted a short burst of radio pulses, which Li Wei translated immediately, a sequence of prime numbers. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17. Li Wei looked at Keller, his face pale. If that's a greeting, who is greeting whom? It's inviting us, Keller said, his voice thick with suppressed excitement. But Mira cut him off. Or it's a trap, Captain Havel said, her voice hardening. It just ate an €80 million piece of equipment. ESA's orders are clear. No direct contact. We are an observation mission, not an infiltration one. Observe what? Keller shot back, moving closer to the screen and pointing at the hexagonal light. A door that's opening? A fundamental mathematical signal. Mira, this isn't science anymore. This is communication. If we receive an invitation and refuse, we've already failed at the starting line. Li Wei, who always trusted the data, shook his head. Adrian, we know nothing about the environment inside. Pressure? Radiation? Maybe it swallowed the drone because it's an automated defense system. We step inside and that thing snaps shut. End of mission. Or worse. Mira looked at Keller, her eyes searching. I am responsible for 2 lives and this entire ship. We are not going in. Keller was quiet for a long moment, his eyes still glued to the 6-sided glow on the screen, as if mesmerized. When I took this mission, he said softly, his voice low and emotional, I thought I was the seeker. But since we arrived, I realize I was summoned. That feeling, it isn't logical, but it's clear as ice. The 1420 MHz frequency, the prime numbers. This isn't a civilization trying to show off its technology. This is a teacher calling their student, using the most basic language of the universe. He turned to face Mira, his expression resolute. Captain, as chief scientist, I am formally requesting permission to conduct an extravehicular activity AVA to approach the object. I'll go alone. Silence filled the cockpit, broken only by the hum of machinery. Mira stared at Keller, then glanced at Li Wei, who looked terrified. She knew the rules. She could refuse. But she also saw something in Keller's eyes, an absolute certainty, a light she had never seen in any other scientist. She sighed, a decision that transcended all protocols. All right. Her voice was quiet but firm, but not alone. Suit up. All 3 of us are going. We go together, or not at all. The door opened. No air escaped inside was a sealed environment, stable pressure, with neutral white light flooding the space. They stepped inside, the first human footsteps into an alien architecture. There was no rock, no ice, no mechanical structures or wires, just a perfect circular space, its reflective surface moving like black water, absorbing all sound until their own breathing sounded like a roar. At the center, a crystal-clear tetrahedron, rotating and levitating in mid-air. Keller approached, reaching out to touch the cold surface. Instantly, he saw not with his eyes, but with his mind. Purple oceans under 3 suns, cities suspended in helium clouds, and silver beings with enormous eyes staring up at a sky full of comets just as he was doing now. He could even smell the sulfur of acid rain and feel their profound sadness, their cosmic loneliness. But Keller wasn't the only one seeing. Mira didn't see stars. She saw Earth. She saw Helios IX, a fragile metal speck, shatter into 1,000 pieces under the pressure of an invisible force. She saw her command lead to the death of her entire crew. Then she saw 1,000 other scenarios. The ship incinerated by an energy pulse, the crew dying from an unknown pathogen, the ship returning to Earth but bringing something horrific. She felt the heat of the fire, the suffocation of a whole breach, the metallic taste of blood in her mouth. It wasn't a prophecy. It was the weight of countless wrong choices, all compressed into a single second. She collapsed, not from fear, but from the weight of a responsibility she now realized was meaningless before an intelligence like this. Li Wei saw nothing. He heard. He heard the whispering of millions of calculations, the structure of matter being bent, the physical constants being adjusted like someone turning a radio dial. He heard the white noise of reality itself, of creation and destruction happening simultaneously. Pi fluctuated before him. The speed of light no longer seemed constant. His engineer's brain, accustomed to order and logic, could not withstand the infinite chaos. Too much, he stammered, clutching his head. The equations, they're all wrong. Everything is wrong. The images and sounds snapped off. A voice resonated, not from anywhere, not through their headsets, but directly in their minds, cold and dispassionate. You are the 8,374th, the 13th civilization to ask itself the same question. Mira was on the floor. Li Wei was trembling, his eyes vacant. Keller alone remained standing, trying to swallow his vertigo, trying to hold on to his sanity. Who are you? We were once like you. Now, we are only echoes, the observers of cycles. We cross the stars to learn how a species sees itself before it self-destructs. The data extracted from the tetrahedron overloaded the Helios's computers. Atlas wasn't just a ship, it was a reservoir of knowledge and history from a star-faring civilization that had existed millions of years ago at the edge of the galaxy. They no longer existed. They had destroyed themselves in a dark energy war, leaving behind machines like Atlas as mobile tombs, walking libraries. They had created thousands of bearers ships disguised as comets, each carrying the copied consciousness of an ancient intellect, traveling through space to find civilizations just smart enough to understand their own insignificance. But the data revealed more. Atlas was not just a library, it was a mobile-grade filter test. The data showed the history of 12 previous civilizations that had opened the eye. Some self-destructed with nuclear weapons immediately after learning of other civilizations, out of fear. Others drove themselves to extinction by exhausting their planet in a desperate race to reach the stars. Some simply went mad from the cosmic loneliness and their own smallness. They didn't find us, Keller whispered, running a trembling finger over the graphs depicting the fall of 12 worlds. They came to test if we were still capable of listening. They weren't testing our technological intelligence, Keller continued, his voice thick with emotion. They already knew that when we arrived. They were testing our wisdom. They wanted to know if a species could overcome its own self-destructive instincts, overcome fear and greed to truly mature. A week later, Helios IX prepared to withdraw. ESA, after receiving the preliminary report, had ordered a total communications blackout and classified all data, deeming it a top-tier security threat. But Atlas was no longer silent. It pulsed with light and time with a heartbeat, the frequency increasing like a countdown. Keller stood in the observation bay, the indigo light reflecting off his face like silent lightning. Mira, who had regained some of her composure, said, "What if it explodes or attacks us?" He let out a small, sad laugh. "Or what if it gives birth to something?" The screen displayed a final line of code, automatically translated. "You found us with machines, but you communicate with each other through weapons. You heard the song of hydrogen, but you do not listen to the cries of your planet. Your species has opened its eyes, but not yet learned to see. We will return when your voice joins the silence of the stars." Then Atlas, before the eyes of its three witnesses, began to fade. It didn't explode. It didn't flee at impossible speeds. It simply became transparent, then vanished into the darkness, like a dream dissolving upon waking. 3 years later, Keller was back in Leiden, now a professor of astronomy. He was a controversial figure. Some called him a dreamer, a liar. Others, after fragments of data were leaked, saw him as the prophet of a new age. The world was divided. The cosmic silence movement called for minimizing all radio signals into space, focusing instead on solving Earth's problems. Opposing them was the Response Alliance, who wanted to build a fleet of warships believing the threat was real. Every night, Keller still turned on the 1420 mHz radio receiver in his office. The signal was always there, a steady pulse, like the breathing of the cosmos. But now, he knew it wasn't from Atlas. It was the background frequency of the universe, an eternal reminder of the test humanity was taking. A bright student asked him one evening, "Professor, do you believe they're still watching us? That the observers are still out there?" Keller looked up at the night sky through the window, where billions of indifferent stars glittered. He thought of Mira, now retired and living in solitude. He thought of Li Wei, who had abandoned engineering and sought comfort in philosophy. "No," he said slowly, his voice deep and thoughtful. "We aren't being watched. We are being graded, and the test never ended. It happens in every action, every choice we make. Every time we choose dialogue over conflict, conservation over exploitation, listening over shouting. That is when we write our answer," and in his heart, a small hope still smoldered. That one day, humanity's voice would be quiet enough, humble enough, to truly join the magnificent silence of the stars.